John? John?
We
need you. Okay.
Are you giving us a red card? Do we have to leave now?
Guest is again joining us remotely, due in part to the wizardry of John Kingsley, who deserves a hand for all the help in getting us on love tax stuff. CCMF would be operating by candlelight were it not for John, and I think that would be very ineffective in the modern world. So Cassie Jaye lives in California. She's an award-winning filmmaker who made a documentary, The Red Pill, looking at the men's rights movement, initially from a very skeptical point of view, but having of all peculiar things in the modern world an open mind, she changed her mind, at which point a whole lot of people who'd been happy to give her awards suddenly didn't remember her name. However, she has not backed down. We're delighted to welcome her. Cassie, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. I just want to let you know I'll be a little soft-spoken because I've come down with the flu. So although I'd love to be there, it's probably best I'm not. So hello, thank you so much for being at this gala. Looks like you're having a great meal there. I really want to start with to the Canadian Centre for Men and Families and CAFE for all the work that you do in Canada. You really are pioneers in providing resources to men and boys and families struggling through, the current day of misandry that we're experiencing. And probably all of you are here because you've seen it in one form or another. And it's really hard to do this work. And I've seen it firsthand with trying to get my film out there and not only talking to my friends and family about the Red Pill movie, but also trying to get it out in the media and then universities and just trying to spread the word far and wide because it is pervasive all throughout the world. It's not just Canada, it's not just the US, it's everywhere that these issues exist, and they're being overshadowed and dismissed for various reasons. And I've spent a few years trying to figure out why we're here, how did we get here? It's not necessarily a new phenomenon. I think this has been going on since the dawn of relationships and families, struggles that fathers face and boys. But I do see this as the next fight for human rights that's long overdue. And I hope that the Red Pill movie helps shift people's perspectives and see the bigger picture. And standing up for men and boys is not at the expense of women and girls. And I think CAFE has been a great example of that it is inclusive and it's a safe place for all people to reach out for help and try to find resources to. Thank you so much for, and I know that they could really use your financial as well as, time and just spreading the word online, on social media, like their pages and talk to your friends and family about it. You can show them the Red Pill. They haven't seen this kind of perspective before. It's kind of a breaker to begin with. And I would like to open up to questions just so I can talk about what you'd really like to hear about. So if you have any questions, I am here to answer.
In other words, what's the situation between states and the variety of variability, shall we say, in the U.S. in terms of support for equality?
That's a great question. And what I've found is that people who are speaking up for men and boys and on their behalf don't have a consistent political leaning or side. I mean, one of the kind of, I guess, fathers or grandfathers of the men's rights movement is Dr. Warren Farrell, and he's an outspoken liberal, and he was a Hillary supporter, and then you have a lot of men supported Trump or the Green Party, Libertarian. So I don't think the men's movement has one they tend to fall in, and from what I've seen, it's actually pretty evenly split. I think the media has wanted to paint a lot of the men's rights activists as being alt-right or far-right conservative, and I haven't seen that. I think it's actually what I've seen, especially this past year, is, I mean, there's a big shift going on in the US, but one great shift is seeing this middle, well, I guess some people are calling it the intellectual dark web, some people are calling it the new media, but it's really these free thinkers, free agents who aren't locked into promoting one agenda based on funding or something. They're really independent voices that are able to have a voice through YouTube and social media. And I see a lot of the gender inclusive, more egalitarian dialogue happening in that center middle where conservatives and liberals are coming together to discuss these issues and really understand the other side. As far as feminism, I do think that they tend to lean left, although there are a lot of conservatives that say I'm a feminist because they take it as the dictionary definition that you support equal rights for women, which I think anyone with a heart would support. I mean, it's very few people who would be against that, and I didn't find them in the men's rights movement. I didn't find anyone that was against women's equality. But they do, I mean, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I'm definitely in a liberal bubble here, and I even consider myself a liberal. But, I think I think time will show, hopefully, if within time the truth surfaces. I believe that people will start to see this as a human rights issue and not some white male conspiracy or all the epithets that are thrown at people who try to stand up for men and boys. I really do think it's a compassion issue and a human rights issue. So hopefully we can find that middle ground between conservatives and liberals to find a space to talk about these issues with the studies and the facts to support why this work is needed. Hope that answers your question.
Next question. Yeah, hi, Cassie Jaye. I really loved all the work that you've done, and I helped put your movie up in Montreal. We had very little hostility, but some. My question to you, because I've watched a lot of the events that were happening in Australia, and as well as your interviews in Australia, the US, Canada, and stuff, and a lot of people, and I was talking about that last night with some people here, how many friends we had lost just for bringing up the subject. And I heard in quite a few of your interviews how many of your friends, hardcore old friends, that have left you. Have you ever been in the last, like, say, year or so since the red pill has come out? Has any of those relationships, were you able to bridge or bring back, or have any of those people that have discounted you as a friend have come back and actually started listening to you a little bit, or starting to at least fathom the idea that you might have something to say? Because that's one of the things I really respected with you in the movie, is that you came in with a certain point of view and you were willing to change with the new data that you received. So good for you, and yeah, I'd like to know if you were able to make some of your friends back.
That's a great question, and I don't know if it's because I'm sick right now that I'm a little more emotional than usual, but it does hit a hard spot when I think about the friends that I've lost through making this film, and colleagues that really supported my previous work about women's issues and LGBT issues, and not only abandoned me with the red pill, but really went on the attack publicly. I think the best part is that my family has stuck with me, and my boyfriend of 7 years, who became my husband 3 months ago, thank you, he stuck with me through this. And one thing that it did help was strengthening my friendships with the men that I've known for a long, long time. And there was someone that I've known since I was 6 who, not until making the Red Pill movie, I found out that his ex-wife threw knives at him and beat him up. And, here I talked about, I will pull it together. So I do hope in time that some of the friends that I've lost will see that I like they think I went to the dark side, or that I'm all of a sudden some horrible person, and really they're basing it off what the media has said. So it's disappointing when people you've known for a long time would trust the mainstream media over the decades that you've known them. Sorry.
So any friend you lost probably wasn't worth it because you seem like a lovely lady. I'm interested in watching the left sort of eat itself now, because the radical feminists are now being attacked by the trans people, saying that they are evil for saying that women have such things as vaginas, which are called front holes now, apparently. So I was wondering what you thought about that.
Could you rephrase that? Because I don't know if I quite got what you're asking.
So there are trans activists who claim, radical feminists who claim that women have vaginas are radical, are evil, and they should be beaten up and excluded.
Women can have penises too.
Yeah.
Say it.
They say women can have penises too. In fact, you know those pussy hats they were making? They've now banned them because they said women can have penises. So, you know, in some way the left is sort of eating itself.
Well, I probably shouldn't speak on the first part because I haven't looked into that enough, but I would agree that the left is eating itself. I've seen it a lot on social media where, these forums and conversations are open for anyone to watch them develop. And I have seen a lot of feminists disagreeing on what would make you a feminist, or what actually justifies you using that label. And I think that's just going to make more people leave feminism if they feel like their voice is not allowed in there because it's just it doesn't follow a certain ideology. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I love feminism, is that I don't see feminism as simply the movement for gender equality or even a movement to empower women and girls. I see it as feminism is for feminism. It's for an ideology that is based on patriarchy theory, and that women are victims, men are perpetrators, and no gray area. And so when that ideology really starts to seep through in debates and online discussions, I think a lot of feminists will start to question their own label and identifying with that movement, because that's probably why they didn't join in the first place. I do think a lot of feminists are calling themselves feminists based on what they heard in pop culture. I mean, you have Emma Watson, who seems like a very nice young woman, who gave a talk at the UN saying that feminism, by definition, is fighting for women's equality, and how could you be against that? And Beyonce, having the feminist title and big bright lights on the stage. So, a lot of famous people have adopted the label. And so I think a lot of their fans are bandwagoning based on their idol self-identifying as feminists without really knowing the actions of feminists or what they're lobbying for or the history of feminism. And feminism is definitely it's like a school of fish. It's not. It does move, but if you look within the fish, you think you're all moving together, but you end up on the other side of the ocean. And I think all the waves of feminism, now that we're in fourth wave feminism, I don't think any of the waves have been in the same area. And so people who identify as feminists, I think a lot of the older generations who say they're feminists are still identifying with second wave. And a lot of the young feminists are fourth wave, which is the social media wave of feminism, and it really is based on the infographics and memes that have these short one-liner, cherry-picked sound bites that sound like it would rile you up, like women make 77 cents to a man's dollar. That would rile anyone up if they heard that and believed it to be absolutely true based on discrimination, and yet that's not the case. That's not the truth of why there is a earnings gap. So, that's another reason why I left feminism I started to see a lot of these myths being perpetuated in the mainstream media and by celebrities and by the feminist organizations to make women angry. And that anger, I don't think was actually leading towards solving the problems. I think it was actually leading towards man-hating. And, when you believe that no matter what, you're going to be paid 77 cents to a man's dollar just based on the sex you were born with, you're not going to strive to live out your full potential because you believe you'll always be at a disadvantage. And I do believe that's holding women back. And I've seen teenage girls in tears saying that they wanted to become a female director, but if they're going to only be paid 77 cents to a man's dollar, then why bother? And so they're not even going to try. And so that's why I think feminism and the patriarchy theory and a lot of these myths that are put out by feminism, it's actually harming women's minds. And when women are abusive, they believe they're justified in their abuse because they believe that they are the disadvantaged, oppressed gender from men's oppression. And so women are abusing and believing that they are in the right. And that's another area that I think patriarchy theory harms both genders. But yeah, sorry, I went on a tangent. I think this is the first time I'm saying this, but yes, I have picked a topic, and I'm going to be starting in October, and I'm so sorry you're going to be teased. I can't share what it's about. I'm very, very sorry for that. But please follow me on Twitter or Facebook, so when I do update people on what I'm working on, you'll be notified right away.
Okay, so this is going to be the last question, and then we'll wrap it up. But I want to say one thing. I'm trying to get you to give money to the Men's Center, as you know. But I will say I am also a patron of Cassie Jaye because I thought it's one thing to talk about the importance of courage. It's another thing to help somebody who's showing it to continue to survive professionally.
Thank you so much for what you do, the authentic way in which you do it, the way you publicize it, the way you stand up, and your bravery. It's very refreshing to see. Particularly from a woman, although that's kind of incidental, I think. You spoke a great deal about the hurt that you felt by having been left. I want to share something with you, but I'm going to ask you the question first. Are there many people? Are there some people? Are there a few feminists that have come to you and said, "We get it. We know what you're talking about. We want to be part of the solution to it. We've got to do it in a particular way, but we want to help." And I will tell you that I'm from Toronto and have thank you for forgiving me, and have an overview of what we do at Cafe. And there are a lot of feminists, people in the VAW field, the violence against women's field, people in the health field. Not all women are feminists, not all feminists are women, but many women do help us. Some of them are feminists. They want to be egalitarian. They see the harms that can happen and the harms that are happening to men. So some of them do it very quietly. Some of them do it because they aren't at the top of the organizations that they work for, because the tops usually run the theoretical part or the ideological part and don't want to be involved with our group. But the frontline people all understand. So having said that, what have you found?
There have been women who've come up to me after screenings of the Red Pill and told me, "I get it. I've seen it. I consider myself a feminist, but I absolutely know men that are going through the court system or contemplating suicide or victims of domestic violence, that they are overlooked and dismissed and often blamed for the situation they're in, or have blame all men for the ills of men." And there's two things that I've identified as the biggest dismissals of understanding men's issues. One is a lot of feminists will say that, well, men do that to other men. So if we're talking about war deaths, men, who's sending people to war? It's other men. And one great counter, if you do have one of these conversations with a feminist or someone who just doesn't really understand, a great counter perspective is to talk about female genital mutilation and how that's actually initiated and implemented by the women in those societies. They do it and they push for it. And so because it's done by other women, does that mean female genital mutilation is not a women's issue? Of course not. It is a woman's issue, and you know, that is one of the issues I deeply care about as a gender equality advocate. Now, the other side of it is saying that, well, it's not the majority victims. So say with the Me Too campaign, the majority are women victims of sexual harassment or assault. And so therefore we can justify the wording of the Me Too campaign to be very overtly gendered, saying that it's women are the silence breakers and they're speaking out against men's actions. I mean, if you look at what's happening with the Me Too campaign, it's very gendered in the dialogue, in the language. And so my response to that would be, well, this is twofold. One is the data is very, you really have to dig deep and also go into researching these issues, understanding that a lot of the research around gender politics are advocacy studies. They're funded by advocacy groups. They're funded by feminist organizations, oftentimes doing the research into sexual violence. And so the wording and has been very specific to trying to identify the female victims. And so one example in the United States with the CDC, Centers of Disease and Controls, the CDC in 2012 changed their sexual violence survey that they do every year to include one simple question in their 2012 survey. They included the question, have you ever been made to penetrate? And so they're trying to research how many rapes take place. But before 2012, they only said, have you been forcibly penetrated? So when they added that one question, made to penetrate, in 2012, they found that of women, 1.4 million women had reported being raped in those 12 months, and 1.7 million men had reported being raped in those 12 months, just by adding that one question. And so, you know, feminist theory and ideology in the college, in the universities, has really had the blind female victims and wanting to identify what are human rights that women are being denied and that they should have. And what I went through with the Red Pill movie was realizing that there are a lot of men's issues that I do consider a human rights issue, such as, should a person have the right to know that they are a parent? The only person that would really have that issue of not knowing they're a parent is a man, because a woman would birth the child, they know they're their parent. But there are women who are having children and never contact the father or tell him that he has progeny, and I would see that as a human rights issue, that you have a right to know you're a parent. So I think we need to have a broader perspective. But so that second dismissal of, well, doesn't it happen more to women? Aren't more women sexually assaulted or harassed, therefore it's okay that our dialogue around it is gendered? Well, suicide, 80% of all suicides around the world are men. And would that justify having suicide hotlines only for men? Would that justify if we have ad campaigns on TV talking about suicide to say that if you're a man contemplating suicide, we will help you? Wouldn't we see that as making it worse for the women who are contemplating suicide, because they won't even identify themselves as going through that if the media only talks about one gender having that issue? So that's why I love what Cafe is doing and the center, because it is helping men see that they could be a victim of domestic violence. Maybe they have been a victim and they never even thought of it in those terms before, because our culture is just, we have a very gendered dialogue right now. Story I will share is that I screened the red pill in small, gosh, I think it was Oklahoma actually. Yeah, the red pill screen in Oklahoma. 2 different women come up to me after the film screening, and they worked at 2 different women's shelters, domestic violence women's shelters. And they came up to me separately. They didn't know each other, but they both shook my hand and were praising the film and said, I know that this constantly contact our shelter needing refuge, and they're turned away, and we don't have anything to give them. We don't have a hotel voucher. We can't even recommend another shelter that would help them because there were none in the U.S. up until very recently. And it's it's like 1,500 miles from most big cities, but I know that there are feminist women who see men's issues in their work or in their lives with their fathers or husbands. Oftentimes women who marry a man who it's his second marriage can see the struggle he's going with through custody, or the grandmother of the father who lost any kind of visitation with his child. Now the grandmother cannot see the children either, and that's when it really hits them that this is, it does take having contact with people who've been through that to really start to get it. And but not just contact, because I think a lot of feminists do have contact with men who've gone through this, but it doesn't register as a systemic societal problem that needs to be addressed. They think of it as just a one-off. Oh, well, that one guy's struggling with suicide, or that one guy's struggling with failure to launch, or that one guy's struggling with his son that's kept on Ritalin, or veterans issues as well. I mean, it's just there's so many issues, and gender theory hasn't identified what men's issues are, and that's why we have the blind spot. Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Cafe and the Center, for doing all the work you do.